All right, hey everybody, thanks very much for coming to this. It's very exciting to see you all. So much excitement about VR. So Shawn and I, we've been working together for a little while. I used to work at Disney Imagineering, is where I first met Shawn. We worked together back at the old Disney VR studio, working on Toontown. Back then, I'd been doing some stuff using HMDs that looked like this, because HMDs used to be big. And I did a lot of work kind of developing stuff for Disney Quest. Then went to the ETC, where did a lot of crazy VR stuff there. I've been there for 14 years, doing all kinds of crazy VR. And of course, now at Schell Games, we've got about 100 people working at Schell Games, and we've been really getting into VR lately. So quick question, who here has played I Expect You to Die? Hands up. Oh man, that's cool. There's a lot of people. We're going to show you the trailer anyway.
I hope you slept last night, Agent, because we have plenty to do today. The higher-ups have noticed your love for danger and feel you're ready for a mission befitting your unique skill set. Namely, your apparent disregard for your own safety. This car has some of the most high-tech weaponry in Dr. Zor's considerable arsenal. Naturally, we'd like to poke at it a bit. This mission will afford you every opportunity to die in peculiar and interesting ways. I would say good luck, and come out the other side in one piece and all that. But to be perfectly honest, and with all due condolences, I expect you to die. I believe defusing bombs is covered in basic training, yes?
All right, so I Expect You to Die was something we'd started as an experiment, a couple years ago now. We'd put a first level of it up on Oculus Share this last July, and we were really amazed by the response that it got. It's been the top-rated game on there for pretty solid the last 6 months. Yeah, since July, since we put it up. And so we've learned a lot of lessons about it since then. So we're gonna talk about 3 different things today, but all of them are going to center around the notion of presence. Because I think most people working in VR kind of are getting this, but I don't know if everybody appreciates it as fully as they should. The thing that really differentiates VR as a medium is that feeling that you are in another place. And it's not an intellectual feeling, it's various aspects of your subconscious mind getting together and saying, yeah, this feels real, I can accept this, and I can buy this. And the thing that a lot of people, game designers, really don't want to take seriously is this notion that presence might be more important than gameplay. And it's one of the things that we are believing more and more, and that we think is really true. Because if you have great presence and your gameplay is only so-so, at least people are there and they're engaged and they're doing something. But if you have great gameplay and bad presence, why are you even in VR? You might as well just be playing on PC or console or something like that. There's not much point if you're not there. And presence is tough. The way we think of presence is like a kind of a fragile soap bubble. It's this beautiful little illusion that kind of floats along, and everything in the universe wants to destroy it. And so most of your job as a designer is getting things out of its way, right? I used to do a lot of juggling, and the jugglers have a saying, the balls are always juggling, our job is to keep things out of their way. And that's exactly what you have to do. So 7 common presence breakers. Here are the 7 things that are most likely to break presence. One of them is certainly motion sickness. Everybody, you know, we don't need to talk about this too much because people have talked about it a lot, but I think it kind of goes without saying that if you're sick to your stomach, you're not fully engaged in the world that you're in, and it serves as a distraction, and it can really break presence. So you want to do all the obvious things. You want to keep frame rate as high as possible. You want to avoid virtual camera motion. I know that that's unpopular, but what we're finding more and more is traditional video games are about exploration of space, Virtual reality games are about manipulation of objects. And if your game is about manipulation, then you don't need to be whizzing all over the place. If you must whiz all over the place, at least do it linearly. Do linear motion, not acceleration, deceleration, because your body can't sense linear motion, but it can sense acceleration, deceleration, and that's what leads to the motion sickness. And for God's sake, keep the horizon level. That's the shortcut to Puke Town, is to tip and tilt the horizon irrespective of reality. A second one really worth mentioning is the problem of confusion. If people are confused about how to use your interface, they're not thinking about the world. They're thinking about what do I click and where do I touch and what am I doing, and they're not thinking about your world at all. So it's always important to keep people not confused in your game. It's way more important in VR because it breaks presence. Shallow object interactions is something that's really counterintuitive, but it's a big problem. So this was something we encountered in I Expect You to Die. This was a very hands-related thing. So when you use a screwdriver in a normal video game, you find a screwdriver, it's going to be for screws. That's what it's for. And if you find a knife, it's for cutting things. That's what it's for. And we did our initial design that way in I Expect You to Die. Like, yeah, we have this puzzle here that needs you to get a screwdriver. Fine, we'll make you get the screwdriver. And we were shocked that people would pick up the knife and try and unscrew screws with the knife. Because I'm like, you'd never do that in a video game, but you do that in the real world all the time. And so things change when your body has bought in and believes that you're really there. You have to design your puzzles differently. And it means your objects need to interact with each other in a much richer way. Another one, this is really counterintuitive. You'd think the deeper in I was into this world, that the better the presence would be. But if it gets too intense, if I give you some crazy jump scares and stuff, it works against you. Because it's so real and it's so scary that you'll see people like, oh my God, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real. And that's exactly what you don't want them saying. You don't want analytical mind jumping in and saying, hey, everybody in subconscious, cool it. You're not going to die. It's all fake. It's all fake. You don't want that. So you have to be careful if you're going into the scary realm that it doesn't get too intense, because weirdly, that breaks you out of it being a strong presence. Unrealistic audio. This is a mistake that a lot of folks make. The amount of time and energy that you put into audio in a traditional video game is not enough for VR. If I drop a coin on a carpet and it sounds the same as when I drop it on the hood of a car, your brain and your body are just going to say, that's fake. That's so fake. You have to kind of figure out how objects are going to interact with each other and do the sound design for each of those. Really important one is the notion of proprioceptive disconnect. Proprioception is when your body's sense of what position is it in. Right now, your proprioception is, OK, I'm sitting here on an uncomfortable chair, and my legs and arms are in a certain position. Your body knows this. If this guy, for example, is in a game where he's like running down a hallway, your body's going to be like, nope, fake. That's totally fake. That is not what's happening right now. Anything you can do to line up the position of the person's real body and their virtual body is going to do a lot to enhance presence. And if you don't, it is going to break it. Interactions must be intuitive, because if they're not intuitive, you start thinking, and when you're thinking, it breaks presence. So a good example is we have a screwdriver in I Expect You to Die that I was talking about. And we had first thought, like, OK, screwdriver. The mouse interaction was our initial development for I Expect You to Die. We'll kind of rotate the mouse with our hands, and that will be kind of like screwing and unscrewing, because I can't like take the mouse and kind of turn it. It doesn't make any sense. So we tried that, and it was absolutely terrible. Even though that's a rotational motion and a screwdriver is a rotational motion, your brain couldn't do the mapping, felt totally fake, felt totally bad. Ultimately, what we did is we just had you bring the screwdriver near the screw and have it unscrew. And we thought, oh, this is a lame solution. This is bad. But it totally preserved presence. Why? Because for most of us, we've used screwdrivers a lot, and we've learned this motion. And having learned a motion, it's now automatic in our brains. Automatic motions we don't need to think about. And so when you put your hand there and it automatically unscrews, then it's not a problem. So you see somebody doing it. I love this moment. Watch. They drop the screwdriver. That's such a real-world moment, right? I totally drop screwdrivers all the time when I'm dismantling a car. OK. see right there. And yeah, and so that comes right out. Anyway, we're figuring out how to make each interaction intuitive is a lot of work, but if you do it, you need to, that helps preserve presence. So one of the big questions is, how do you do your different interface design for different platforms? We initially designed I Expect You to Die completely around a mouse interface. We thought a mouse, we knew a mouse was guaranteed to be there for PC VR, and we weren't sure what else was going to be there when we started working. We're like, let's go with the mouse, because we had this really cool way of interacting. One of our guys did an experiment realizing that if you take the mouse pointer and you keep it on screen no matter which way you turn and then still move the mouse around, that actually was a good way to interact with things. I thought it was going to be terrible, personally. I thought, man, your body's going to get so confused. I'm going to turn this way but reach this way to get an object over here. That'll be terrible. But then we built it, and it was completely natural for everyone. And I didn't even want to put our initial demo up because I was afraid everyone would steal this idea, because it really is a big part of the secret sauce of I Expect You to Die. No one has stolen this idea. I don't know why, but that's fine. That's cool. Actually, it sucks, and no one should do it, right? So then we said, all right, how are we going to take this into the realm of the hand controllers? And so in order to talk about that, we're going to switch over to a live demo.
Always a great plan.
Yeah, nothing bad about doing a live demo at GDC when you can't even get your PowerPoint slides to work. All right, so here we go. Sean's getting this thing on right
Going
here.
into the virtual world.
There you go. So this is an area we call the office, which is kind of just sort of a prep and getting ready area where people can kind of manipulate things. So now you see Sean here is using the mouse right now. So he's picking up objects. See the reticle? And so the reticle there, it can pick up objects that are near or even far away. It turns blue when you're over an object. And you pick one up, and then he can kind of wiggle around with his hand. And he uses the mouse wheel to bring things near or put them far away. And what's really interesting is you can turn behind you. It goes with you, and you can kind of just put it down over there and then pick up the hat. Now, of course, his hand is staying here, and you'd think that would be totally counterintuitive, but it turns out your body's relationship with reaching uses polar coordinates, not quadrilateral coordinates, and therefore anything far away from you is the same from your brain's point of view. Weird, but that's how it works. Anyway, so we had the mouse working, so then we kind of had to figure out how we were going to make the switch over to start to use the hand controllers. And so there were a lot of things that we had to face once we did that. The first question was just this business of hand presence, because anyone who's experienced using these hand controllers, you know, the Oculus Touch or used the Vive hand controllers, it's very powerful. People are using the phrase hand presence, of being able to reach into the world and pick things up. And so we knew it had to be really good, because the first thing people do is they tend to, they look at their hands. So you can see one of the nice things on these controllers is they let you wiggle your fingers around, and that's a nice experience for people. But it's really important that it lines up perfectly. It's not like the mouse, where it can kind of be any which way. It needs to be really where your hand is, because your proprioceptive senses start to break presence if you don't. One of the choices that we made was, since there were no visible hands in the original version, we gave them black leather gloves. Why? Well, if the hands look too masculine or too feminine or too white or too black or too whatever, your body would say, these aren't my hands, these are somebody else's hands, and it breaks presence. But you can imagine yourself as a secret agent wearing black gloves, and so that helps preserve presence quite a bit. Now, one of the things you immediately run into when you start to deal with hands is the problem of collisions, right? So like Sean, just like put that plate down and just put your hand through things right there, right? So we made a decision to let hands go through things. Why? We could have had the hand bounce out, but then immediately your proprioception is off because you're seeing the hand in one place and it's located somewhere else. Having the hand go through things and not collide well isn't great, but it's better than the alternative. Sean, there's no smoking in the auditorium, please. Sorry. Thanks. Let's see, what else? Oh, picking up objects is a big question. So these controllers have two different triggers. They have a trigger button for your index finger, and they also have a grip button, which is used with your middle finger. Now, There's a lot of debate about what's the right way to use these things, because picking things up with your middle finger isn't completely intuitive. We as human beings tend to pick things up with our index finger and our thumb, but these controls tend to want you to use your middle finger and then use your index finger for activating things instead. That makes a ton of sense with a gun. It makes a lot less sense with a dinner plate, that I have to pick it up like this and then my index finger does nothing. And what we find is intuitively, most people's intuition to pick things up, they squeeze both fingers at once. So there's a lot to work out with that. Presently, we're still wrestling with that a bit. Related, one of the things we found, throwing objects is something people love to do. And getting it right is important. One thing that we found was that putting some rotation on objects as they fly really makes the throwing seem a lot more real. Because if you let people pick things up, they're just going to throw stuff. One thing you'll notice that when Shawn picks up objects with his hands disappear. This is for two reasons. One, people, when they pick up an object, they want to look at and focus on the object. And secondly, we use a variety of grips for a variety of objects, and having to choose the right grip for the right object, no matter where you pick it up, it's just really hard. And weirdly, if your hand kind of disappears from existence, it doesn't bother your brain very much, because once you pick something up, your brain doesn't want to think about your hand. When you're reaching, your brain thinks about your hand. Once you have the object, your brain no longer thinks about the hand. So fading the hand out, we find, works pretty well. So picking up objects is one thing. Poking is something else. Because, like, see these buttons on the radio? I don't want to pick those up. How am I going to do that with a trigger? So one of the things that's nice with these controls, they let you stick a finger out, and you can just poke things. Now, that's cool, but one of the things that's a bummer is you get no tactile feedback. When I squeeze a trigger button, I get tactile feedback, which is nice. Ironically, to push buttons in VR, don't push a button in the real world, and then your brain explodes. Another issue is the question of two hands versus one hand. With our mouse interface, we just had one hand we were interacting with everything in the world with. And then now we switched to being able to use two hands. That made some puzzles way more complicated. So like an example, the bottle, which Shawn has dropped here, people had a tendency to, when they just had the mouse control, they just looked at the bottle. Once they have two hands, then people, what they really want to do is they want to grab that cork and pull it off. And if the interface doesn't let you do that, then you kind of have a problem. And of course, it changes a lot of your puzzles, which we'd found. Now, one of the one thing, hand affordances is a thing really worth talking about. There was, in the original version of I Expect You to Die, there was this bomb. I guess it's the same thing, talking about the bottle with the cork, right? It's the same thing. It can really go far, because we had this bomb in I Expect You to Die that had these wires. Nobody tried to pull out the wires with the mouse. People are like, I need to cut those. But once you have a hand, everybody tries to rip them out. So that really changes things. Telekinesis is a key feature of this game. And it was a big question. Should we keep it? Can we keep it when we switch over to the hand mode? In our initial version, we didn't, and thinking, well, we'll try and make it really realistic. But we really missed it. We love being able to reach across the room and just grab an object. So we had to figure out how to do it. Initially, our thought was, well, maybe we'll do this cool thing where you put one hand by the side of your head, and then you're like psychic guy, and you can and it makes a beam go out. Which is cool until you turn away. If Shawn turns around way to the left, the camera can no longer see the hand anymore. So it ends up being a real problem. So we tried a couple other things, and then eventually we started playing with the thumbsticks. And that was what we ended up with, was using the thumbsticks to be able to push and pull objects. And that's been a pretty good compromise, using these things. One of the things that we found is if you do this a lot and then you go into other VR worlds, it almost seems limiting that you can't just reach across the room and grab things. You get kind of used to it. And the last thing we should talk about is freezing objects. So we added this system for freezing objects in place for a couple reasons. Like, can you pick up something, put it near your head, Shawn? Well, the hat's good. But like, say you put the gun. When you freeze objects in place, you can look at them in a way that's really very compelling, because you use a different part of your brain to process objects that are closer than your hand. I know that sounds weird, but there's a special part of your brain that turns on anytime anything comes within your hand and your head. And being able to freeze objects not only looks really cool and enhances presence, but it's really useful for puzzle solving. I can lock several objects in place. We found it necessary to make them bob when we did that. Because if they stayed still, people thought the game crashed. And really important for confusion, tutorial was super important. We had all this interface. We loved it. We did a simple tutorial. It was not enough. People did the things, but they didn't remember them. So we've evolved our tutorial to allow a lot more kind of fun moments. Like we make you freeze the dynamite in there and then blow it up. Boom. Come on, Shawn. You're going to run out of bullets. There you go. And when you add fun moments to your tutorial, it makes everybody remember how they work. Woo. Shoosh. OK, so that's all the stuff about hands. So now we're going to switch gears a bit. I'm going to hand it over to Shawn here. Shawn is going to take it from here, talking about a lot of the evolution of our puzzle design in the game and how we've gone from the car to a lot of our new levels.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jesse. So Jesse talked a lot about presence breakers. We want to maintain presence as much as possible. What does that really mean? What does that look like to a developer? I think this is a great slide because this is what presence and being fully immersed and in the moment means. This girl is testing I Expect You to Die. She's about to be shot by a laser. She's covering her face, right? She believes she's there. Clearly, the mouse is on the table. She's not even touching it. She wanted to feel what the ceiling of the car felt like. So she reached her hand up to feel the ceiling of the car. Again, I don't know how many times I've seen people use their right foot to accelerate because they believe they're there. It's real to them. This one guy, he came up with a little song when he needed to remember the order of the bomb wire. So he had this little melody.
Is lost. So blue, 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 green, green.
And so he came up with that, and he had to play it a couple times because he died and he had to start over. And so he came up with that, and then so this time he succeeds. The dynamite's on the seat. He's feeling pretty good. He explores a little more, and he finds the cigar and the lighter.
Of the plane?
Lights it up. Feels pretty good about himself.
Smoking.
You get a little smoking warning in there. All right, so he's really relaxed. He's really in the moment. Is he too relaxed?
Should I consider that your resignation, then?
What the? Oh no! Oh no! 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 Nice.
Haha, nice, right? So he died. So what happened? I don't know if it's a little hard to tell in this video. So he was done with the lighter. He lit it, so he dropped it right on the stick of dynamite that was in his lap, and that then blew him up, and he realized it. And so he died in a fun way, and he learned something. Oh, lighters are dangerous. I should probably close it before I drop it on dynamite. And so that's one of the helpful deaths that I'll talk about later. But what if someone's really, really immersed, and they feel like something that's not there is completely real? Yeah. So you can't, don't worry, she was okay. Are you okay? All right. So she believed the back seat of the car was so real, or the back of the seat, that she leaned on it, and it wasn't real. And we had that carpet there to originally protect the touch controllers if people dropped them accidentally. It also serves to protect people's knees when they fall out of the chair, which you've had happen at least half a dozen times. So believe you are there. That's presence. And this is a pillar poster. So something we do at Schell Games is we have these pillar posters, which are very colorful posters, and they have a phrase or a couple of words, and they serve to be reminders of what's important to the project. And so if you're ever in a quandary about what you're supposed to do or how you should solve this problem, you can look up on the wall and you can see, believe you're there. Does this, what's the solution that helps make you believe you're there? And you can use that. So we made the first puzzle, and it was well received. And so after that, we're like, OK, this has some traction. We need to make this a real game. But that means we need new puzzles. So what do you do when you need new puzzles and you need to think about it? You get the team together, and you do some brainstorming. And so we had one idea, we had another idea, and we had a whole bunch of ideas. And a nice civil discussion ensued. And we tried to decide what ideas were worth going forward. And we didn't really have many criteria that we believed in. So we're like, OK, let's stop. Let's take a step back. Let's stop arguing, discussing, and figure out what made the car puzzle work. So there's 5 things that we identified. The first one being comfortable. So what do I mean by comfortable? There's comfortable in that I don't get motion sickness. they're as comfortable that while I'm sitting in this chair, I'm not really encouraged to get up and move around. I've got wires, I've got a chair, I can fall out of the chair, I can trip on the chair. And so we wanted to make sure that we kept whatever new puzzles we made comfortable for the player. The producers will be happy that I added on budget. So on budget, both in resources, when you're making art for VR and people can bring it close, you've got to make it well enough. You've got to make everything in there interactable. So you've got to have the tech to make it all interactable. You've got to have the design to make it interactable. You've got to run at 90 frames per second. So you need to stay, if I'm going to do a crazy level, one of the levels we talked about was a bathroom. And, it sounds kind of funny, but we're like, yeah, you're going to be in like a spy bathroom, and things are going to like transform. And then we're like, wait a minute, bathrooms have a lot of water. And oh, bathrooms have like towels and cloth. And oh, bathrooms have a mirror. And if I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I don't see myself, what am I seeing? So we're like, no, forget the bathroom. Probably for the best. Affordances. What is affordances? So if I look at a bottle, I know I can pick it up. If I look at a coffee mug, I'm going to pick it up by the handle. If I see a door, I'm going to turn the doorknob. These are affordances that objects project upon you. So the car has a lot of cool ones, right? There's the steering wheel you can turn. There's a glove box I can open. I can find things inside that. There's buttons I can push, knobs I can turn. So that's really well. That worked really well. Helpful desk, we talked about it a little. So the guy in the previous video, right, he learned that fire can light other things on fire, if that's a stick of dynamite or something else you need to burn. And so we're okay with people dying. After all, it is called I Expect You to Die. We're okay with people dying as long as they learn something from the death, as long as they're not confused what killed them, and hopefully it's a cool or fun moment for them. And if we do all this right, then the player feels clever. And that's actually one of the questions that we ask them after we do a play test. When we bring in some people and have them naively test the game, we want them to feel clever. And so one of the questions we ask is, what was the moment that made you feel the most clever? We also ask what was the most frustrating moment, what was the best moment. But that's one of the questions we always ask is, when did you feel the most clever? Because we want to maximize those moments. So to continue, we've got these now, 5 qualities of a great experience across the top, and we've got some of our ideas. And so, we sat around in a circle, and we did some voting. 1 was like, yeah, maybe this affords it well. And 3 was like, yeah, absolutely, this totally supports this quality. And so we all went around, did some fingers, and tested the voting, and tallied it all up. And then we did some sorting, and we're like, OK, we've got a path forward. This is perfect. We've got enough people. We're going to do 2 pods. We're going to do the window washing pod and the Hunter's Lodge pod. So what is window washing? Window washing, you're standing on a platform outside a window. You're doing some covert operation. Hunting lodge, you're sitting in this like evil villain's hunting lodge, and you're trying to find something or stop this missile. And we had a lot of good ideas. So we let's do the next step. We're going to get these teams together, and we're going to do what we call a white box. And so what is a white box? A white box is basically a lot of Unity cubes, heavily using Unity cubes. And the artists will do some concept, and they'll make some of the objects that if they're just a cube, they don't really have their affordance. So you do some key objects, and you make this white box, and then you can start playtesting, because playtesting is super important in VR. We talk about it all the time. In the white box stage, we do it 1 a week, maybe 2, every other week at the least. And so as you're playtesting, you want to start early, you want to do it often. You playtest at work. You playtest at home. These are my friends having a great time, clearly, at my house, or at my parents' house, actually. This is over winter break. And so, you get you test at work, test at home, test at the airport. You're bringing this thing places, I grabbed this kid. He was sitting with his mom. His mom was okay with it, don't worry. I said, hey, you want to try this VR experience? And he's like, sure, I'll get in there. And then the mother tried it, too. It was great. And so, playtest as much and as often as you can. And so what did we learn from all this playtesting, this great playtesting from these new levels? What did we learn? Well, we learned that the levels were terrible. Well, OK, maybe mostly terrible. But that's still not great. So we're like, well, gosh darn it, why are these levels not as good as we wanted them to be? And we sort of identified 5 problems. And so let's go through those problems one by one. I love this slide. So problem 1, no clear visual goal from the start. We sort of stumbled into this, really, for the car, because, we told you drive the car out of the plane, but no one read that. The voice said it, but no one really hears that. But you're in a car. You're like, I want to drive this car, right? So it immediately affords itself that you want to drive the car. And then, you have these, that's the long-term goal. And so what's the solution to this for our new puzzles? We want to put the goal in front of you, literally. In VR, you're looking all around, and we don't know where you're looking, where you will look. We can actually check the transforms to know where we're looking. But we want to put the goal literally in front of them when they start the level. And we have different goal types that I talk about. So you have the long-term goal, which is drive the car out of the plane. But you have the mid-term goal of, OK, I need to start the car. And then you have the immediate goal of, I need to find the key and put it in. And so as long as you can support these types of goals, and then you complete that and you look for the next midterm goal. Be careful switching goals. In one of the levels, the hunting lodge, which I'll show a little video from, we actually switched the goals halfway through, and that was very confusing to players, and that was a bad idea. So problem 2, freedom. You want freedom when you're in VR. The whole, this is a room, I start in this room, well, I can open that box. That's not that great. I want to be a kid in a candy store, right? VR is so new and exciting. I want to go in there, and there's tons of things to do. Maybe I look through this candy, or use one of those cool machines to like fill a straw up with sugar. I don't know. It's great. It's a candy store. It's freeing. Embrace it, right? Don't focus the player too much. If you focus them too much, even if there are parallel paths, if you focus them too much, they'll focus on that, they won't see the others, and if they get stymied on that, then they'll just be frustrated. And so you're sort of balancing these parallel and serial tasks. The player should feel in charge. If they don't want to do one thing, there's something else they can work on. So I'm just going to show you a quick video from the hunting lodge here. This is an early playtest, or Whitebox playtest, and you're looking around, and there's a big red button on the desk, and you probably hit that. And the chair falls in the hole. Oh, it's cool, it's a hole.
Hey, what's that?
And your mission was to find the captured agent.
Find my spy
And
device
so-
and throw it down. I'll handle the rest.
It turns out he's in the hole. Great, you
No,
found him.
That's not quite what I'm looking for.
And he needs something. So I'll give him some stuff.
I don't think I can use that.
And he throws it back out. And this was hilarious and fun. But guess what? If you
No,
didn't
not that.
understand the clue to what they wanted, it was very frustrating because things popping out of a hole grows tired very quickly when you're just trying to, so you like shoot a chair or something. I don't know. So what you really want to do is give people multiple paths and let them sort of work on different problems in order so they can sort of have this feeling of, well, oh, I'm stuck on this. Let me move to something else. Now, why you want the serial at all? Because if they skip a whole thing, they miss out on a lot of fun. Maybe the puzzle ends too quick. And so you're sort of behind this balance of a couple parallel tasks, all of those done, okay, leads to the next set of parallel tasks. And again, it's driven by the player. These are the layers of discovery, right? When I do this one thing and I complete my midterm goal, I get to the next midterm goal. And I'm like, well, they unlocked this thing, and now I can work on this. So layers of discovery is our second pillar poster because it was very important that we support this as we come up with these new puzzles. Problem 3, no clear breadcrumbing. So you want a clear goal, and you want to embrace these midterm and immediate goals, but the players need to know how to get from one to the next. And so the affordances that I talked about earlier are super important because if I steer a steering wheel or I see a key and there's no key or I see a key, like I can put the key in there and I can turn it right. So it affords that goal. It creates your immediate goals. And then if the goals lead from one to another, so I complete this thing, I unlock this thing, and there's something in there that sort of hints at something else I missed. And if they do the other thing first, well, there's something in there that hints on that goal that they missed. And so these goals need to lead from one to another, and they fit together. Then you're doing it right. So we call that lead to cleverness. You don't want to beat them over the head with cleverness. You don't want to give it away. You want to have these sort of point to point to point. And at the end of the day, the person feels very clever because they came up with it. Yes, you hinted at it, or yes, we had this one puzzle where we have a painting on the wall, and the woman's eyes are looking at something. And you look at the painting, and even subconsciously we found this worked. What is that woman looking at? And you look over, and there's the clue to the next puzzle, right? And so it's sort of, small things that you can do. You don't beat them over the head, but you lead them to cleverness, so that we use that to make some of our decisions. And of course, if they want to be clever and you don't have great solves, I'm ashamed to admit this is actually a photo of my house. There's a cracked window, and I stuck some tape over it. But I'll fix it later, really. Don't worry about that. So you want cool solutions, right? The solutions should make sense. And the solutions should make you feel clever and thus make you feel cool. So if you're doing it right, hey, the staff was, the right height because we had the back of the thing in Indiana Jones, and that made us change it. And oh my gosh, I feel so clever. And then this awesome moment, and I feel really cool because it's a great solve. Speaking of awesome moments, you want at least one, hopefully more. Some of the white boxes that we did, they didn't really have them. And so what you want is awesome moments. It's literally inspiring awe in people. VR is amazing. And what you're doing, if you can do it really well, you let the player cause the moment. Not only because they feel cool because they caused the moment, but if they cause the moment, you know at that moment where they're looking. So they're guaranteed to see the awesome moment, right? If I'm over here and I do something and something happens over here, well, guess what? I just missed your awesome moment, and that's not so hot. And the player in that moment, they are the hero, right? They're in the game. VR lets you be in the game. They let you be the hero. Embrace that. Let them be the hero. All right, so you know, we had 2 pods working in parallel. We made these white boxes in a couple of weeks. Could we have done this faster and cheaper? Yes, we could have done it faster and cheaper. But how, you ask? Simple, one-word answer: brown boxing. What is brown boxing, you ask? I'll show you a little video.
And then ding, 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 this goes green. Spyro flooded is now green. Hooray! Engine. So engine's over here. Temperature is the number, and that's a pulled cord, and that's a grenade. Okay, this is a grenade? Yep. It's a little up here. All right, you're holding it in your hand. The pin is missing. Ah!
So I hope that was clear, but thank you, thank you. So brown boxing, it's like, it's D&D, it's improv, you know, it's easy to set up. I didn't need an engineer to help me script this, right? I could build this, brown boxing, sponsored by Amazon. So I can build these things. I actually brought in a floor jack from my house to make the pump, because it was really important that the pumping felt good, and I really wanted that. So I gathered people around the office. They called it Fort Kick-Ass. They're like, "Are you making a tree house over there?" But it was a great utility, and it was a great tool. We ran about 10 people, built it very quickly with one of our artists, Tyler, and he drew the fishes on the little little portholes. You're underwater in a sub. It's hard to tell exactly from that video, but trust me, if you're there, you feel like you're there. And it also really helps with touch, right? You want to keep things within arm's reach, right? And so arranging the things around you, getting exactly, well, I have to really stretch for that. Well, let's move it up quick. It's super easy to do because it's a cardboard box. And as you run it through, I had my little flow chart. I don't know if you could see that, but I'm sort of reading off the key things. And if he's confused, like he's like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, that's a grenade, and because he just picked it up. Oh, and there's no pin in it. And so it's like, oh, now I've got this grenade in my hand. I can't put it down. So what do I do, right? So it's this really cool moment. And you can get to these really cool moments really fast if you do this brown boxing. We tried paper prototyping, not as good as 3D prototyping, or as I like to say, brown bag. Feel free to tweet that. All right, so let's do a quick recap. We wanted to make new puzzles. We had the car puzzle. We had a ton of ideas. We didn't know how to narrow it down. So we thought about the car puzzle. We analyzed it. And we came up with these 5 things, right? We want the player to be comfortable. We want to keep the whole project on budget. We want affordances that make sense. We want helpful death, so if they do die, when they die, we expect you to die, that they learn something, that it's fun for them. And we want them to feel clever. And we tried to use those, and we tried to make 2 new puzzles. And we made the puzzles into white box form, and we got players playing in them in a rough form. And we did some play tests, and it just wasn't there. We'd lost the magic, so we needed to take another step back and say, what did we miss? And so we came up with these. You need a clear goal, and a clear goal right from the start, right? Put it in front of them. Allow them that. Give them the freedom to explore different things to get to that goal, but have a path to cleverness, right? Lead them to cleverness. That's our pillar poster. Lead them to cleverness. When I'm done with one land, I can go to the next. And they should feel awesome. You want them to feel awesome when they do it with their great solves, right? Allow them to have these awesome moments during the game. But this is a lot of stuff, right? And so we looked at this, and we're like, wow, these 10 things, but they're all really important. And so what can we do? Is there any way we can sort of put these together? So some of them lead to each other, so let's think about this a little more. If you start with a clear goal, all right, great. And you add to that affordances that people can use and that are intuitive to use. You give them the freedom to explore different things. And if they fail, you make it helpful, right? You make helpful deaths so they can learn something. And now, of course, you've got to do all this while keeping in mind the comfort and sort of the overall budget of the project. So I don't know if matrix multiplication or what, but it's modified by comfort and budget. If you do all that, then you're going to end up with a path to cleverness that people can follow to have great solutions. And if they have great solutions, they feel super clever. And at the end of the day, they're going to feel awesome. And that's what you want as a VR developer. You want them to feel awesome. And it's up to us as developers to make experiences that you come out of feeling awesome because you were in the game and you were the hero.
All right. Thank you, Shawn. So we thought at this point, if anybody had questions, we'd love to take them. Please, if you can make use of the microphones, that will be helpful, and you'll be recorded in posterity in the GDC vault.
Perpetuity.
Make sure your questions aren't too long. There is no oxygen in the vault. You may suffocate. So, yeah, please go ahead.
Howdy. 2 quick. First one, With pressing buttons, do you ever try having haptic feedback when you press a button?
Oh, yeah, we didn't mention that. But
We didn't. No, absolutely. The haptic feedback goes a long way. And so we have that, and actually the way the engineers have set it up for us, we can tweak sort of the amount and length of the haptics and sort of fine-tune it to each individual object. And so yes, that absolutely helps a lot. But at the end of the day, you're still pressing your finger through something, and so, yeah.
The other quick one is, how do you get over, when you're testing someone, the gee whiz factor of VR if they're doing it for the first time?
That's a great question. I've got an answer. Do you have an answer?
Go, baby, go.
We can both talk, but you give them a minute to get used to it. So none of we tend to shy away from sort of time deaths in general, but we certainly never do it the first thing, right? Even when you go into one of the harder puzzles, we still give you a moment to stop and look around and take it in. Because even if they've come from the tutorial, even if they've sort of done that, they get into the lodge or the car and they're like, oh my gosh, this place, and they're looking around. If we killed them right then, that'd be really bad. So you want to give them time to sort of acclimate, to get used to it, to look around, and then their actions, you know, if they pull something and it triggers a booby trap, that's on them, right? And then the next time they can think about that booby trap before they pull that thing, right? So you give them time to acclimate to it.
Yeah, we found the same thing in a lot of contexts. We tried bringing Minecraft into the classroom to teach kids math. Oh my God, they lose their minds. They're in Minecraft in class, and you got to give them 10 minutes before they can like even think.
Calm down.
There's this great book called, it's a book for gym teachers, Games for Giant Activity Balls, right? And it's like games all involving a ball that's 5 feet tall.
God, I love those balls.
Right? And one of the instructions is you can't just roll that ball in to class and say, here, kids, we're going to play a game. You got to give the kids like 15 minutes to just get used to the idea of, oh my God, there's a giant ball, and it's exactly the same in VR. You got to give people time. Over here.
Thanks.
With motion controls, one of the feedback that I generally get when I have hands and I pick something up and they disappear completely is people sort of, that actually is something people like comment on. Generally, like, I don't know if it's ever really been a usability factor. That's just something we get a lot of feedback on for some reason. I was wondering if you ever experimented with like translucency of hands and whether that made a difference, or if it's just not really been worth it.
We have. We actually tried a faded out version of the hand, and we were like, well, maybe if it's faded out a little, you won't realize that you're holding the cup like this, or, you know, or like this, right? So we found that the disappearing hand worked really well. One thing was that it was a little weird was when you grab something that's attached. So say you're moving the visor in the car. We still disappear the hand, but you want to see that you're moving the visor because it's kind of like invisible. And so that's sometimes we would use the blue tentacle, and that would remain. So you have some point of reference for your hand. The most important thing is that you have a point of reference from your hand, we found. So if you do hide it and you're holding something, that's usually OK. And the transparent, it still doesn't, like, if you had like an unlimited budget, maybe you could make animations to hold everything and like exactly where you picked it up. Like, that'd be great.
Maybe.
But yeah, disappearing hands, I mean, people get used to it pretty fast, and we've seen it's not that
Yeah,
good.
I mean, it's not like it's a perfect
slam
solution,
dunk,
but it's the local minimum that we can find so far, solving that problem. And I think one of the things that is important, if you just have people manipulate things for no reason or things that are not interesting, they are going to notice stuff like that. But if it's really cool stuff, they're focused on the cool stuff and not focusing on kind of the fine points at the interface.
Yeah, thank you.
That helps. Yep. On this side?
Hey guys, great talk, thank you. So I'm trying to absorb one of your original comments about how in VR, presence trumps gameplay. Presence is now king.
Yeah.
And in the games, you know, when the organizations we work with now, we all are comfortable with gameplay being king. And so when you're on board writers and you're on board new people, like, look, it's about the gameplay. And we usually have someone who's responsible for the gameplay at the end of the day, whether it's the lead designer or creative director.
Yep.
So I realize it's early days. You guys have small teams. Probably everyone is kind of responsible for presence. Everyone is responsible for fun. But stretching this out a year, looking at bigger teams, bigger projects, do you think there's going to be a lead presence owner? If so, what discipline would this come from? Or would it be a technical person? Would it be an artistic person? Do you think there's one person ultimately who would be responsible for making sure that presence is always maintained?
I've got a guess. What do you? Yeah.
Go for it.
So my guess is it's going to fall on game designers, because game designers are most responsible for how does it feel to play this game, right? And this is all about how does it feel when you do this. Now, we do, at Schell Games, we do a lot of stuff that's kind of outside the normal box of interactive design. We do a lot of interactive toys, for example. And if you've ever done things that are like a toy that has like digital components, you're already in this space of like, wait, am I focused on the game, or am I focused on how fun is it to touch this toy? Because that's not game design. That's kind of fun design, toy design. It's all, but if you take a step back and you say, you know what, forget all this toy, game, whatever, it's all experience design. And so I think more and more, I think we're going to see game designers needing to see themselves as experience designers. Again, Minecraft is just a great example of that. Really? That's a game? No, it's not really a game. It's an experience, and it's awesome. But you have to think bigger and kind of take a broader view.
Thank you.
And one other thing is specifically with our puzzles, like if people were really engaged, they would keep working on a puzzle that they were stopped at, right, that they were stuck on. If they were like confused and they lost presence, they'd be like, I need a hint, I need a hint. And it's like, oh, we failed them, right? And so it was very clear when we dropped the ball on that.
And a side note on that, just really interesting, and again, this sort of came from the world of toy design. One of the things we've done in some of our toy products is learning about fiddling fingers. Like your fingers love to play with stuff, right? And we find if we've made a toy, and the whole time after people play with it and try it out, and then you go to interview them, if they can't put it down, if they're still like fiddling with it with their fingers while they're talking to you, it's a super good sign. If instead they play with the toy, and then you say, can I ask some questions? And they say, OK, yeah, sure. I'll answer questions. And then you're like, ugh, like we've totally failed. Same thing in VR, particularly in our game, which is very much a puzzle game. Puzzles require you to stop and think. That's what puzzles are. Right? And so I've hit this thing, and I'm like, how am I going to start this car? You're not just going to sit there and think. You're going to start to fiddle with stuff. And if there's nothing to fiddle with, then like you kind of lose it. But if you are fiddling, it draws you into the world, even during the time that you're not actually playing. So there's so many deeper things that we have to think about.
I think the original question was, is there a presence person? So not currently. Everyone's responsible for presence. Eventually, I could see it being the case.
Yes, Chief Presence Officer, CPO. It's happening.
That's what that means, right?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed your discussion about transitioning from the mouse input to the Oculus Touch controllers. One of the elephants in the room for a lot of us is that the consumer unit is shipping with the Xbox 360 controller.
Yeah.
And you didn't talk about that. Does that mean you've given up on the controller, or do you have any guidance or history, or
We haven't given up on it. We gave up on it at first.
Back before we knew it, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, initially we were like, we don't know how to get good hand presence with this thing. Let's just not do it. We have great success with the mouse. Let's just not do it at first, we thought. But then once we found that our best solution for telekinesis was to use the thumbsticks on here, it made us say, wait a second, the thumbsticks work on here. Maybe we can make it work. So we did a lot of experimenting, and we have made it work. And one of the things that's fascinating is in our testing with it, we tested it versus the mouse as opposed to testing it versus the hands, just to sort of see how people felt about it. It was really interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people, when we would play them both, sort of give them one and then give them the other, or reverse the order. And a lot of them said the mouse is more intuitive, but if I was to play another level, I would use the controller, just because a lot of them are gamers and they're used to it. But I think so. There's definitely room for both.
Yeah, there is. But again, in general, in terms of creating presence, it isn't great for creating presence because you're doing everything so virtually. Yeah. It's not using your body in a normal way at all to use that. So it reminds me, like, I keep thinking of the early days, like the original Macintosh. One of the things Steve Jobs insisted on the Macintosh was that there would be no arrow keys on it, because his argument was, look, people have the mouse. They don't need arrow keys to move a cursor around anymore. They'll have the mouse. But some people are like, aren't some people going to want the arrow keys? And he's like, no, we have to train them not to do it, right? And it's the same thing. The gamepad is a really strange device that we've all learned and we've all grown up on. It's a lot like the QWERTY keyboard. It's kind of weird, but like it still hangs out because we're used to it. How long it'll hang out, I don't know, but it makes sense for it to be a bridge. But I look at it that way. I think it totally makes sense for 2016 VR to be using a gamepad. Whether gamepads in that form are going to make sense in the year 2020, I'm kind of skeptical. But we'll see. Maybe they will.
And in the meantime, as much as you can make it intuitive and sort of not make them think about it is the best.
That's
then
right.
They can keep the presence.
That's the key. Yeah, because I don't know. Yeah. There's so many things that can go wrong. Yeah.
So you kind of just touched on the question I was going to ask, but I wonder if you can comment on, I think the telekinesis is a really cool feature of the game, but it feels like giving someone a superpower is a slippery slope to breaking the presence. Like you shatter the illusion that you're really in the real space because you can do things that you couldn't do in the real world. Can you comment on the balance between giving the player a fun thing to play with, but maintaining the illusion that they're really there?
Well, this is where things get really weird, right? Because yes, I cannot, with my mind, reach across the room and like take a book off the shelf. However,
Can't do it.
if I'm really in a room and there's a book on the shelf and I want to take it off, I can totally do that. That's like totally a thing. And if my controls don't let me do that, then I don't feel like I'm missing a superpower. I feel like I'm, differently abled in some problematic way, right? So it's sort of weird that like we have to use superpowers to have you do normal things. But on the other hand, one of the things that we found is that when people, particularly at this point in time, when people put on the headset, they're like, I'm ready to be a superhero. I am Iron Man, right? They're ready for like this kind of expanded experience. They don't expect an ordinary experience when they put it on. So for the time being, it makes sense.
Yeah, and when we were just mouse, that was the only way to pick up things, right? And we would ask people afterwards, like, how did you pick that up? And they'd be like, well, I just picked it up. Like, they didn't read it as telekinesis. Like, that was our backstory.
And
but like,
we don't even tell that backstory.
Yeah.
This had been a big debate for us. Are we going to explain?
We allude to it.
Yeah, we allude to it, but we don't really tell it. We don't say, OK, now we're going to have to explain. This is really weird. You can shoot this beam at it and it grabs things. Yeah. We just say, yeah, here's how you grab things. And people are like, OK, I'll grab some stuff.
And going back to the comfortable thing, right? If they're seated and they have a bunch of wires on them, right, then, yeah, it's more comfortable to just grab the thing over magically. And it makes you feel cool. It goes back to the awesome moments, too.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
So one of the nicest things about I Expect You to Die is this, when you're dealing with stuff near field, like when you're defusing the bomb and stuff like that. One of the things I noticed, because I actually had the opportunity to bring 30 people through that experience. It was their first time in VR. And
Can we get your notes? That'd be great.
We need video of that. Sounds like a pretty good playtest.
Well, this is an interesting one, is that I noticed, humans have this workspace concept, this area they like to work in, and it's kind of bracketed in the far field by their reach. But on the near field, we kind of intuitively bracket it with our body. So when there's not a body in scene, I noticed that we ended up having bombs kind of in the pelvis, and it was hard for them to work. Like, have you thought about a solution to that beyond putting a body in there?
Yeah, so right, and so putting the body in there is a real problem, which is why we don't do it. You thought the hand problem was bad. Like, this body doesn't look like my body. It's not the position where my body is. I would never. Who picked these pants? There's like a million.
I can't feel my legs.
I mean, there's a million problems that there is with that. But there are similar problems with no body. Particularly, you bring stuff in. You're right. Like, we normally use like our torso as kind of a limiter. With no limiter, you kind of end up doing this. Oh, sorry for being loud, but you end up kind of just having that happen. This is partly why we use the freeze thing, so you can kind of freeze things, and it creates sort of a new, more comfortable space.
Do the hand controls help since they're physically limited by your actual body?
They do help somewhat, because now you tend to frame things with your hands. Like, now that you can work on one thing with another, right? Because it used to be like, OK, I want to light this with the lighter. Well, let me put it down in my pelvis and then light it with a lighter. Now I'm holding it in my hand. I can just light it up here. So that helps a bit. I think another way to help is just to give people, and then we don't do too much of this, but partly because we have the freezing mechanism. But without that, if you put little shelves or something where people can place things for easy manipulation, it probably makes sense.
Yeah, in the lodge we have a desk, and it wraps around you, and same with the office. And in one of our newer levels, we've had a little slide-out shelf you can put right in front of you. So we definitely keep that in mind.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Great talk. You mentioned that you asked at the end of playtests, like when you felt the most clever and when you felt the most frustrated. Had you already done the analysis of the first puzzle to come to the conclusion that you wanted to know about cleverness, or was that just part of a survey you were asking people at the end beforehand?
So when we did the car puzzle originally, we had questions, and they were similar, but we sort of really were like, OK, we want to compare these questions over time as the puzzle progresses. And so we sort of fine-tuned it down to 5 main questions. First one is, what was the best or your favorite moment? Second one is what was your confusing or least favorite moment? Then we ask, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing, what would it be? Or change, add, or remove. Then we said, is there anything you ever tried to do but the game didn't let you? So that cues us into like, oh, they wanted to combine that with that. Could we support that? Is that going to be too much work? Maybe we should remove that item completely because we don't have time to support that, or maybe we should support it. And then the last one was, I've lost track of my questions in my head. But I guess the point is, we solidified that more for the next puzzle, so we could get that data over time and figure out what things happen.
But early on, we'd figured out the cleverness. The pillar posters that Shawn showed were actually our second pass. We'd had an earlier version of pillar posters that were a bit different, but Lead Them to Cleverness was one of them.
Correct.
It had been there all along. So a really important lesson for us, I think, was after we'd done the car level, and people liked it so much, greatly exceeding our expectation, because honestly, this wasn't the first I Expect You to Die level. We put another one called The Library up on Oculus Share some 8 months earlier, and nobody really noticed. It was like, whatever, there's a thing. And we thought, well, that's too bad that people aren't excited. We love it anyway. We're going to keep going. And we did the car, and then the car kind of just everybody get really excited. And then we thought, yeah, we're geniuses. We're so smart. We know what we're doing. And we looked at it and we're like, well, why is it so good? And we had a few reasons, and we thought we knew. And then, like Shawn said, we went and did the other levels. We didn't know. We'd tripped into some stuff, and then we had to take a step back. Like, wait, what is the secret sauce in here? And we had to do that analysis. But the cleverness was one that we'd triggered all along as being crucial and a little unusual in the VR space.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for the talk today. So for all the levels you've talked about in design, it was mostly a seated or standing environment. Have you ever considered using the HTC Vive with full scale room and trying to manipulate objects throughout the room and creating that in a virtual environment, seeing if that could potentially interest some users?
Absolutely. I should mention, I mean, I Expect You to Die is just one project that we're doing. We actually have 5 different VR titles in production right now. That's presently on the Oculus. We have a game called Water Bears VR, which I think is being shown.
It's being demoed at the Vive.
It's being demoed at the Vive booth that you can check out. It's very much a room scale game. It's available on Steam right now. If you have a Vive, you just go get it. So we're doing stuff on the Vive. We're even doing stuff on the gear and the cardboard and those sorts of things. We are very much looking at taking I Expect You to Die and bringing it to the other platforms. We're kind of fascinated with the idea of maybe finding ways to take it a little more room scale. But this is one of the challenges I think we all have with high-end VR right now. Room scale is really cool. Are people really going to set up their houses to do this? And if not, do I need to make like multiple versions? So one for people who are just standing but can't move much, one for room scale, and then one for people who have to sit down super still. And then your development costs start to multiply.
Remember that on-budget slide? That really terrifies the producers.
Right. So we're kind of, one of the things we love about I Expect You to Die is that it's modular, and that we can go and add more later. And so we're very excited about the idea of being able to add some kind of optional, more room scale levels. But we haven't got that figured out yet. But room scale is super fun. We're hoping to do more with it. And I'm really eager to see like how does the marketplace accept it, which is probably why we have that Water Bears VR out there to sort of test the waters, as it were. Yeah.
This is a question about mobile VR as well. Pantomime has a solution for giving you hands and letting you reach into mobile VR. And I wonder, have you tried to work with gaze? Is that hopeless? What are the issues with mobile that you've discovered at this point?
We took some early passes at mobile with this particular game. Yeah. We were finding the gaze was challenging and not really tied into what was making this game great. So we were kind of taking a step back. But we've done other games. Like we have a Ryan Trail VR out on the Samsung Gear is one that we're doing there. So it all comes down. I mean, there are great games on all these platforms. You just have to figure out like what's best. We love the hand presence a lot. For me, that's the juiciest, richest VR feature. But still, there's a lot of great VR games that don't use that. Like the one that blew my mind, as much as I was kind of like, I'm not a big fan of game controllers, the Adventure Time game that Turbo Button did on Samsung Gear, it blew my mind. It's years ahead of in terms of just VR design and using a game controller. So there are great things that can be done almost no matter what platform.
Hi. I'm curious if you guys suspect the really fragile bubble of presence to become harder to pop as users get more and more experience in VR. If I have 500 hours, 1,000 hours in VR experiences, am I more forgiving, or is it just so lizard brain that I can't really learn to accept presence or accept these experiences more naturally?
Yeah, this is a super good question. Are we all going to become inured to presence and we're just going to like, it's no big deal anymore? I think of it a lot like the early days of computer games, when it was, oh my God, I'm controlling a spaceship. I blew up an alien. Oh my God. And is the world just going to get over it and move on? Well, in some ways, yes, the novelty wears off, but there are new things to add and grow and change. So certainly what works in 2016 isn't what's going to work in 2018 or 2020. But I guess I look at presence not so much as just a novelty that's sort of cool, but I think of it more as a basis. And we're going to have new kinds of presence. Like we went from like, oh, I'm looking around to hand presence, and that's something new. And then as we start to get external motion body trackers, and you actually, oh my God, I raised my knee, and I can actually see my knee in the world. You're going to have more of a full body presence. And then other people in the world. You're going to have social presence, where you get really uncomfortable when someone comes up to you, like right there. So there's many, many layers of presence. I feel like we've got at least a decade of new kinds of presence to explore before we really, really get kind of jaded about it and move on to something even weirder. I don't know.
Yeah. And there's really exciting problems now with just the controls and what people are used to and what they'll get used to. When the iPhone came out and the touch thing, right, they made everything very physical and real in the UI because you're like, oh, it's a page. I can turn this page. Then they got rid of that after a couple of years, right, because people were used to it. We'll see some of that with VR, but it engages so much more of your body and your senses and everything about you. It'll probably be slower until we get rid of that. I think it'll be amazing for a long time.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Hi, so you touched on earlier certain games being better for VR than others, like interacting with objects versus just having an experience. So do you think eventually all games will move to VR and we can work past that? Or are we still going to have like two sections? These type of games are going to have a screen. These type of games are going to have a headset on.
It's a super good question.
I mean, I think so. I Expect You to Die is an escape the room game in VR, right? There's awesome escape the room games on PC, on tablets. I think there'll be genres that can go to VR easier, and you always want to create the game for VR, or at least put a lot of thought into, because otherwise you're not going to succeed.
Yeah.
But
I know I look at it as VR is going to be a new part of the ecosystem of games.
Yep.
Mobile didn't destroy PC or console. It just kind of, everything shifted around a little bit. Television didn't destroy going to the movies. I still want that in my life. These things kind of fit together, but just in a new way. I think VR is going to, it's got a lot of hype right now. It's going to have a lot of hype for the next year or so. But it's going to find its place. But its place is pretty serious, because it is going to be the most intense video gaming experience. Because it involves so much that's primal for us as human beings. So it's going to be the most intense experience. It's going to be the most social experience. But it's not always the most convenient experience. And so it'll have its place. Yeah. But I think its place is gonna.
It'll start small. It'll get huge though, because like we bring, when we test and gamers sit in there, they usually get shot by the laser because they're like, oh, how do I dodge? What button do I hit? I bring my mom in there and she's like, ah, laser, right? And it's like, yeah, she knows what to do. And so I think VR will go to a much, much larger audience as soon as it's able to go to a much larger audience.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see. Over here.
It seemed like when you were talking about presence, there were some things that were kind of like a reptilian thing where you'll just like feel them and it will destroy your sense of presence, but there were other things where you could kind of be distracted by them, away from them, like they were more an analytical thing.
Yes.
I'm curious if you have kind of a taxonomy of like presence breakers that like these things you can be distracted from so that they don't destroy your presence, and these things you can't.
It's really complicated, right? So you're talking a little bit about the triune theory to the brain here, right? So we don't know a lot about the sense of presence. It's not a thing we can measure or put on a scale. We've been talking about it. People have been talking about it for about 20 years. Some psychologists have found ways to study it, but we don't really fully understand it. One of the things that does seem to be true is it's a lot of different parts of your brain kind of voting about, is this real or is this not real? And we know that that's weird in your brain because every night we have dreams and you totally think they're real. There's actually nothing actually happening. It's all imaginary, and you think it's real. And so it's very complicated because you've got all these little voting pieces, the social part, the distant part, the close part, the object manipulating part, the hands part, the proprioception part, and they're all voting, and some are voting louder than others because if something's really wrong, one of them will scream and everybody listens and they're like, yeah, this is fake. And even the analytical mind, I can't will myself into believing a thing. I have to kind of feel it, but I can will myself out of a thing. So it's complicated and not well understood. I would argue that it's more like cooking than it's like chemistry. You know, exactly how much is going to give you the right flavor takes experimentation.
Delicious VR.
But it doesn't mean you shouldn't think about it and have theories, because we're all figuring it out together. I think we'll take one more, and then we better clear the room.
So this question is about input. So we have software that detects gestures and hand movements using the smartwatch. But so we can get things like swinging your hands to walk, but we can't get finger tracking because it's just not that, you know, the software is just not there.
Yeah.
Do you think, in your experience building these user interfaces, how essential is finger tracking, and is this a viable way of doing input in mobile VR?
It's a super interesting question. I think there's certainly games that would love to have finger tracking, but you can go an awful long way without it. And then, yeah, I mean, we've gone this far without it, and we've been fine. There's anything that you can track, you can find something to do with it. Honestly, the best and most satisfying VR finger tracking device I used in 1996, it was the multi-gen smart scene system, which somehow no one remembers. There were gloves that all they had were sensors on the back of each hand. They used magnetic trackers to track the position of your hands. And then how did they track finger flex? They couldn't. They couldn't track that at all. So then how did you interface with the world? They just put metal dots on each of the 5 fingertips, and they could sense when one touched another. So the only thing they could track is when you pinched things, but they could track that perfectly. And it was I'd never felt such good hand presence, because I could actually reach out and perfectly pick up an object. Not an approximation of maybe are my 2 fingers touching. I actually knew it. So there's power in finger stuff, but what I would say, if you don't have finger tracking, you know, don't make a game about, you know, being dainty with your fingers, right? There's so many things you can kind of make experiences about. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Do feel free to contact us.